Many 14 players, including myself, are confused when they are told how WoW world races work because many of the things that we take for granted, such as well-tuned bug-free raids, simultaneous worldwide releases, or the ability to flex the different jobs on the same character, simply don't happen in WoW. Hi, I'm Stal. I've been doing hardcore raiding in Final Fantasy XIV since late 2018 when FFXIV was released. I've achieved World 2nd in the Epic of Alexander Ultimate, World 1st E1S, World 2nd E10S, World 3rd E11S, as well as multiple other top 10 finishes. I'm here today to talk about the hardcore raiding experience in 14, such as raiding as soon as the servers go up, trying to clear as fast as possible, and all that other stuff. After watching the recent Race to World First in World of Warcraft, I thought of making this video to compare how the raids differ structurally and how it affects the teams in both games. As a disclaimer, I haven't played WoW personally, but I have team members and friends who have, so we've worked together to create this video about how hardcore raiding in 14 works and how it compares to the world race in WoW. If you've been curious about how hardcore raiding teams function in 14, or you've come from WoW or other MMOs and want to know more about how it works, or even the general raiding process for most groups, this video will be able to provide some insight on how this all works. So let's get into it. Final Fantasy XIV has two difficulties that could be compared to Mythic raiding in WoW, known as Savage and Ultimate. The way they work is quite different, but this video will firstly compare Savage to Mythic as they are similar in terms of dropping best in slot loot, also known as BIS, and having multiple encounters. Ultimate fights in 14 are more for bragging rights, as it drops a really shiny cool looking weapon that has a very minimal upgrade, and you also get a title upon your first clear. The first step in preparing for World First raiding, or raiding in general, is to prepare your gear, which is your BIS. Getting gear ready in 14 is a relatively simple process. You clear the raids once a week, and then you can run 4 expert dungeons which take around 15 minutes each to cap your weekly currency, or you can opt to do other in-game activities. After 8 weeks, you'll be able to get your BIS. There is a small chance that you may not get your full BIS in 8 weeks, but it won't take much longer than that. You will also want to prepare food and consumable potions before the raid tier, but you can either craft them or buy them from the market board. Players don't need to prepare alts because all jobs can be leveled on one character. On the other hand, in WoW, each week you have to do world quests for Reputation, Mythic Plus, possibly PvP, Mythic raids depending on your luck with RNG drops, and Torghast and Shadowlands. These systems have to be repeated on a daily or weekly basis. Some of these are RNG grinds, so you have to constantly be playing the game to get stronger for the next tier. You'll want to get a team ready before the raid tier begins. Savage raids in 14 consist of 8 players, whereas Mythic raids in WoW consist of 20 players. However, teams will often have more members than that for various reasons. In Final Fantasy XIV, you'll need to prepare an 8-man fixed roster. There's no need for roster swaps even if you decide you need to switch jobs, because gearing is really easy and you can swap jobs on the same character. For example, my team ran a red mage early in the latest Savage tier for an extra race, but he swapped to ninja for the final fight for more damage. All we needed to do was prepare an extra set of crafted gear. Speaking of crafted gear, this is new gear released alongside Savage raid releases, which will be better than previous BIS. Raid teams may hire a crafting team to support them in preparing this gear as soon as possible, or they may just choose to buy it off the market board. In WoW, teams need to prepare a 20-man roster and a bench in case you need to swap raid composition. Due to RNG loot and gear checks, a player might find themselves benched just due to bad luck and loot drops, causing them to not deal enough DPS. In addition, some teams have shot callers who aren't playing the raid, but instead are watching and giving calls. Top teams may also recruit players to help them do splits, which are runs of lower difficulty raids for gear. Now let's talk about what happens when the raid is released and progression begins. In 14, The raid is released at the same time for all 3 regions, NA, EU, and JP. All weekly and daily resets happen at the same time across all regions, meaning all regions start on an even playing field. On the other hand, WoW raids have a staggered release, coming out first in NA, then EU, and finally China. Weekly resets are also staggered, meaning that if a boss is gear gated, regions that have earlier resets will be able to get better gear earlier. This can give an advantage to teams in certain regions, especially when you take into account how fights are designed. Speaking of design, the design philosophy of the bosses varies greatly between the 2 games. In 14, Savage bosses are not gear gated and are designed to be beatable in crafted gear. There was a short period where bosses were gear gated, but the design philosophy was changed at the start of 2016. In general, 14 raid bosses are released bug-free. The last fight in 14 to have a bug that was fixed was the second fight of Alexander Midas Savage in February 2016. The only bugged fight before that was the final fight of the Binding Coil of Bahamut, all the way back in 2014. That's 2 fights with bugs in 8 years of raids. In WoW, bosses are gear gated. This means you have to grind for gear and content that you've already done mid-proc, or even have to wait for the weekly reset for more gear. There are often mid-fight adjustments to boss abilities, HP, and damage. Actually, as I am recording this voiceover, they've just done it again in the Sylvanas fight. The devs seem content to use world races as bug testers, fixing unintended strategies and bugs as they are discovered. This is despite WoW having a public test realm, while 14 devs test raids internally. So what does this mean for how teams spend their time during progression? In 14, when a new Savage tier is released, you only do new content. There is no need to farm the lower difficulty of the raid for gear. Certain teams may choose to do the new Extreme Trial for weapons, which are a slight upgrade over crafted gear, depending on substats. The Extreme Trial is a new fight that is released alongside Savage. Also, when you wipe, your team will respawn right in front of the boss, ready for another pull. In WoW, a significant amount of progression time is spent doing splits and farming for better gear. This means that you'll be doing content that you've already done during proc rather than learning new fights. Now, let's take a look at how things we can learn before progression affect the raid in both games. In 14, there are 2 structures of Savage raid releases. For the first tier of an expansion, Normal mode, which is comparable to LFR in WoW, will be released 2 weeks before Savage mode. Normal modes contain less boss attacks and phases when compared to Savage, but you can still gain some insight into what fights are like. For all other Savage raid releases, Normal and Savage are released at the same time. This means you'll run through Normal once and go straight into Savage, which will be almost 100% unknown to you. In WoW, raiders can get information from sources such as the PTR and the Dungeon Journal. The PTR offers a preview of some of the bosses and can provide information as to how they will function. Due to the PTR, 1 week of Heroic, and the Dungeon Journal, a lot of information on the tier is already known to the players before they start raiding, except for the final boss on Mythic. There are some other differences between how raids are structured that are worth discussing, starting with the number of raids and how often they are released. In 14, normally there's a patch every 3.5 months alternating between Savage and Ultimate. 3 Savage tiers and 2 Ultimates are scheduled per expansion, although Shadowbringer's second Ultimate was delayed due to real-world circumstances. Each Savage tier has 4 fights and each Ultimate is 1 encounter. WoW includes a new raid tier with every patch, but time between patches isn't regular. It can be a few months or a year between raid tiers. A WoW Mythic raid tier normally contains at least 10 encounters. The next point is not directly related to hardcore progression or the world race, but it's worth bringing up as a difference between how raiding works. Whenever a new patch releases in 14, it stops add-ons from working. Sometimes an entire tier can be cleared before add-ons like Advanced Combat Tracker, also known as ACT, will be patched. Since the game has no in-game DPS meter or API, most add-ons are built on top of ACT, which is a parser that can be modified to have additional features. However, the game is designed so that add-ons are not needed to clear any of the fights. Whereas in WoW, fights are designed with add-ons in mind as confirmed by Blizzard themselves. This means that they will work through APIs and won't be broken by patches. Add-ons are also used extensively by world racers. Another point to consider is how the devs support hardcore and world racing teams. In Final Fantasy XIV, when the first clear happens, they normally get a tweet from the devs. Clear tracking is done through a community effort, which shout out to Frosty TV, pillar of the raiding community who has been helping us track clears since 2016. Ooh, thanks Frosty! On the other hand, in WoW, there are leaderboards for fastest clears built using an API, and Blizzard supports the race to world first, with the devs paying close attention to the teams participating. Now let's take a look at the points above through the example of my team's progression. I joined my Addons Promise team in mid-September, with the raid being released on the 7th of December. This team was on an entirely different data center than I had played on before, but in the roughly 2.5 months before the raid was released, I was able to get a new character leveled and geared for the Savage raid. On the day of the raid, my team entered the normal mode of the raid as soon as the servers came up. We quickly cleared the normal mode of the raid and entered the first floor as Savage. We hadn't seen any of the fights before this, and we only got a glance as we blasted through normal mode. We cleared the first fight, Cloud of Darkness, in around 2.5 hours, achieving the 8th kill worldwide. After we cleared, our crafting team informed us that they had completed our gear, so we collected it and used it for the next encounter. With this new gear, we were able to defeat the second fight, Shadowkeeper, in around 3 hours, achieving the 2nd kill worldwide. This was followed by around 5 hours to prog through the 3rd fight of the tier, Fatebreaker, which we got the 3rd kill worldwide on. For the rest of the first day, we progged through the 4th fight, Eden's Promise, until we reached Enrage. Due to the fight length, we figured out that this fight was a door boss, with the second phase likely to happen once it was defeated. We decided to sleep as it was unlikely that we would be able to beat the Enrage, and progress through the second part of the fight fully without sleeping. At the start of the second day, we progged until we defeated the door boss, letting us see the second phase for the first time, with it being a new boss called the Oracle of Darkness. At this time, we decided to go do the extreme trial as we were having issues consistently hitting the DPS check for the door boss. We farmed the extreme trial for 10 runs, getting weapons for everyone in the group, before going back into the Savage raid. We were not able to defeat the boss on this day and went to sleep to get ready for the next day. And on the third day, we spent about 5 hours of prog before we were able to defeat the second phase of the final boss and finish the tier. Unfortunately, we fell behind in the final fight and ended up finishing in 11th for the tier due to a lack of DPS in the group as a whole. Following the end of the tier, we did 8 weeks of clears before taking a break. From my understanding, ultimates don't really have a structural equivalent in WoW. Ultimates are raids that are designed to be challenged with BIS gear, which only rewards cosmetic weapons and the player title. They cannot be overgeared, as your level and item level will be lowered to the maximum that was available when the ultimate was released. I will be going over ultimate quickly, as for many hardcore 14 players, ultimate is the best raid available in the game. To prepare for ultimate, you need the BIS from the previous tier's Savage raid. As mentioned earlier, this takes around 8 weeks of weekly clears of Savage and a few dungeons a week. You'll also need to prepare some food and potions. Ultimates are based on earlier fights in the game, so it's common to go do those fights in order to prepare for their respective ultimates. During progression for ultimate fights, you won't be doing anything other than the fight itself. Ultimate fights are very long with multiple distinct phases and can be up to 19 minutes in length. The length of progression is also longer. For example, my group spent around 90 hours over 7 days before clearing the most recent ultimate, the Epic of Alexander ultimate, on our way to the world's second kill. For many of the hardcore 14 raiders, ultimate raids provide the greatest and most enjoyable challenges the game has to offer. After clearing ultimate, there isn't really a need to clear it again unless the group wants more weapons for glamours, which is the 14th version of transmog. If the group is interested in farming weapons, they can do it once a week until the next patch, when the loot restriction is unlocked. To conclude, the design philosophy of 14 is that you don't have to spend your life in the game. You play the content you want, and then you can take a break until there's more content you want to do, and this applies to hardcore raiding as well. Most players do not do hardcore progression or world racing, but attempting to do so is just so much more accessible in 14. This extends to groups with less time too. In 14, it's perfectly feasible for any group to aim for a week 1 kill of Savage, or to go into fights and learn them without any information. Many 14 players, including myself, are confused when they are told how WoW world races work, because many of the things that we take for granted, such as well-tuned bug-free raids, simultaneous worldwide releases, or the ability to flex the different jobs on the same character, simply don't happen in WoW. In WoW, it seems that all of the game system are designed to gear you up and funnel you into raiding, which means that you have to do content that doesn't interest you just to raid. Whereas in 14, raids are part of the extensive types of content, but you hardly have to do anything non-raid related if you don't want to. That doesn't mean that raids are neglected though. On the contrary, they are well designed with interesting mechanics and are definitely worth checking out. For players who feel burnt out at having to do tons of preparation and farming just to get into raids, I'd highly suggest trying out Final Fantasy XIV. Finally, if you're interested in watching hardcore progression in Final Fantasy XIV, I'll be streaming all of that and leveling and whatever during Endwalker, so follow me at twitch.tv/stal. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I don't really have an outro, so stay hydrated, drink water good, and I hope you have a good day. Yeah. Bye. Okay, I'm gonna go back to fishing.